Hi, good morning, Kiara. My name is Jacob Gage, and I am a high school biology teacher and am a former lab scientist who worked at Lonza for approximately 3 years doing quality control work. So today, let's talk about cancer cells. What are they? How are they formed? And what do they do? So, in general, cancer cells are cells that divide at a faster rate and than their neighbors that they're from their surrounding tissues, and they also do not behave the same way as the other tissues around them. So let's talk about skin cells, for example, because skin cancer is a little bit easier to understand. So let's talk about how they're formed. So in general, when you think about everyday life, we go out and we are exposed to the sun for, some cases minutes or hours. And well, generally, our skin cells are designed to absorb some of this sunlight. In fact, it's healthy. It creates vitamin D. But if we absorb too much of this sunlight, which we get the harmful rays, the UV rays, the ultraviolet rays, these can over time cause mutations. So the more exposure, the more sunlight, the more mutations that can happen to our cells. When our cells are actually designed to handle a certain level of mutations. In fact, they have corrective mechanisms that can actually reverse some of this. The problem becomes when we get too much radiation. Like, think about a sunburn. You can only get a sunburn so many times until eventually these skin cells receive so many mutations where they become cancerous. So what happens next? So these cells that received too much radiation and now have too many mutations, become cancerous. What happens is that means that so many other genes that control the cell cycle, which controls cell division, become damaged. And so some of these genes, like you may have heard of the P53 gene, for example, they no longer regulate the cell cycle. So what this means is that these cells are going to divide at a faster rate than their neighbors. The problem with this is that they're also going to form clumps because these cells also lose something called contact inhibition. So under normal circumstances, cells will typically divide as needed. So let's say you get a scrape or a cut on your arm. These cells eventually will just divide to replace the cells that were lost. Or in the case of if an organism is growing, these cells will only divide to keep up with the growth of the organism. So these cells are going to divide at a faster rate. Also, what happens? Because these mutations have affected not only the cell cycle genes, they are also affecting other genes, which I don't have time to go through all the biology, but basically they're not going to behave the same as the cells surrounding them. And so when they don't behave normally, this affects the tissue, which affects the organ system, which can affect the body in a negative way. So we have these cells that do not behave the same way and they don't function the same way. And so in short, it's bad all around. And one of the third things I haven't mentioned is that these cells also have the capability of spreading to other parts of the body. And then again, so we have these overactive, overdividing cells that do not behave normally. And basically, they're going to take their dysfunction with them to other parts of the body. And this can be fatal in the case of, like, if they spread to the brain or if they spread to the lymph nodes. So in those cases, well, if we have brain tissue that's no longer functioning properly, that can most certainly lead to death of the organism. Or if they go to the lymph nodes, and this is part of the immune system, well, now we have immune cells which are supposed to be policing the body and fighting the pathogens and invaders. These cells are no longer going to be able to do their job. And so, in this case, if you have immune cells not functioning properly, your immune system suffers, and then the body suffers when it can't fight off infection. So that's just a few examples of what can happen. Also, I wanted to mention that these cancer cells are also selfish. Like, sometimes these cells, they have a higher rate of metabolism, so they're going to gobble up all the nutrients, the sugar, the protein, the fats around them, and they're going to be selfish, and they take more than what they need to grow. So they're hungry cells, and sometimes they do something called angiogenesis, which means that they are sucking up basically trying to get blood vessels growing towards them to feed them. So in general, to recap what I've just said, cancer cells are cells that they have so much DNA damage where they can't function properly. They overdivide, they're overactive. 2, they do not function normally. And the third one, I think, is just that they can spread to other areas of the body. I hope this was helpful for your presentation, and good luck. Bye.